Live brunch. We are live and welcome to another episode of Live Brunch. Live Brunch. Live Brunch. Welcome
Hello.
to our season finale of Live Brunch.
Oh,
And
yeah.
hopefully we will get rid of that awful intro music.
I like it. You say
said
live
live
brunch. Like, it gets in your head. Live
did not edit
brunch.
that video,
Live
if
brunch.
anybody
I
saw.
think it's brilliant. I think we're keeping that.
And yeah, so we've come to the end of our story series. So the whole set is being changed. We've got quite an exciting new set for next week. There have been requests by one individual to get rid of this yellow table, which I think is quite iconic. So if you think we should stick with the yellow table,
Oh, yeah.
drop it in the comments.
That is how we work.
Save the yellow table. And let's start a campaign to keep
Whatever
our
people
beloved
want,
yellow
that's what we
table.
give them.
Thank you. Matt, another superb job with closing our teaching series on story.
Yeah.
Hope Made Known. Do you want to do a quick summary of, not the series, but this sermon that you just preached?
Yeah, I mean, the whole series is about transformation, the way in which God brings about change in our lives, and so this message was kind of about sort of a forward-looking message that God changes us, not just for the sake of it, or not just so it's a nice thing, but actually because He's got plans and purposes for our lives to walk into. And so this message about purpose, the fact, taking from the story of where God sort of is with His people and they're journeying towards the promised land, which they still don't get to even as we finish Exodus. But that helps us to understand that the transformation that's happened before is preparing them for their destiny in God. So it's a lot about destiny, that the fact that God has got plans and purposes for our lives as well. Jesus has freed us and saved us and forgiven us and transformed us so that we can follow Him through life. And there's opportunities, the ways that He wants to bless us by being a blessing to others, and to follow Him in the small things as well as the big things in life. And yeah, so that's kind of what this message was about. Shall I do the questions that I've kind
I was
of
thinking
got
we
for
should
her?
do those small group questions at the end.
All right.
We land the show.
Let's do that.
Thank you, Matt. Purpose. I've recently bought Barack Obama's volume 1 of his presidential memo, is A Promised Land. It is phenomenal.
All right.
I'm really enjoying it. It's quite a remarkable story. It talks about quite an unremarkable young man with nothing going for him. No political clout, not born into a famous political family,
Yeah.
not wealthy. Doesn't seem to be like a genius intellectually. Just quite a normal guy, and yet his rise to becoming the president of of America, which is, sorry if that's a spoiler alert, if you've been living under a rock for the past 8 years. I'm
12 years ago.
on the bit where he is standing for state senator.
Right.
And it's just a remarkable story. So I'm plugging the book. Thank you, Mr. Obama. I hope you enjoy my endorsement of your book.
He's an avid follower of this.
He does.
show.
He does mention it now.
We get a retweet.
But it's so fascinating. Quite where he talks about how in his college days he starts, and in some ways finding his purpose and getting involved with civil rights movements and action on obviously a much smaller level, and just getting so caught up into that. But I guess my question is counter to that. So we can portray the big stories of the Barack Obamas and suddenly expect that everybody's the next
Yeah.
Barack Obama, which
Yeah.
more often than not
Yeah.
might not be the case.
Yeah.
How do you kind of counterbalance talking about purpose, especially for Christians, people who are watching this, with the stark reality that you might just live a mediocre life?
Well, good question. I think one of the things that we understand when we read the Bible is that God's priorities and what God deems as success is often very different to us. And often in the society that we live in, what is celebrated most of all is people who are powerful, people who are wealthy, people who are, have amazing talent and, geniuses and that sort of thing. Those are the people that get attention and in one sense, understandably so. But you look through the story of the Bible, and God is constantly taking people who are failures, who mess things up, who didn't have much discernible talent, and writing great epic stories with them. And what we see is that what God most prizes is not power and wealth and success and talent. It's faithfulness, and someone who is willing to pursue what God prioritizes in terms of goodness and faithfulness. The Bible values things like self-control and faith and courage and trust in God, and those are things that we can take hold of in whatever we're doing, whether we're raising a family, whether we're doing a terrible job that is just menial and we just hate. But actually the perspective that God's story brings to it is actually, the way in which I do this job actually reflects on God. Like, God is interested in that. Whether you're, cleaning the floors or whether you're state senator or whatever it is. I kind of suggested you were a state senator there. But yeah.
Identity as Barack Obama as the state senator. But I guess, how do you hold the two in tension, faithfulness and purpose? There's something about when you do talk about purpose, we could, I guess, get misguided by the fact that there's something much better that's there for us somewhere out there in the near future or in the foreseeable future. And I'm really living for that thing. And the menial task that I've got to do now, being faithful in these tasks, kind of means, doesn't mean a lot because I've got something much bigger than what I'm doing at the moment. How do you hold those two in tension?
Well, I would suggest even not holding them in tension. I would just, maybe this is more from a personal point of view, but I think, what God's purpose is what God has put in front of you right now. Like none of us. Sometimes we have things maybe that God's spoken prophetically to us about what might happen in the future. That's all. But that is rare. That is not the most common way of thinking about our lives. But somehow it's more. It seems to us more exciting to think about. Oh, God's got a great destiny. It's going to happen in 10 years. But actually, what I see when I read the Bible is that God is much more interested in us walking in the plans that He has for us today. And one of the verses that comes to mind is, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God. Like, humble yourself, do what He's calling you to do now, and at the right time He'll raise you up. And he will, if He wants to give you, if you're faithful in the small things, He'll give you, opportunity. So, like, part of following God's story for our lives is trusting God for that bit, not sort of planning too much in detail about what the 10 years' time is going to be like. God is the author here. God is the one that it takes a hold of our lives and takes us to those places. And we can spend so much of our time worrying about that and thinking about that and think, have we missed it? Have I missed the will of God for my life? Have I missed my destiny? That sort of thing. No. Follow God today. And seek first His kingdom, but He'll take care of everything else. And I think that's one of the aspects of it.
I guess the other side to that question is, am I playing safe and being too comfortable and not stepping out into what could be God's purposes and plans for me? I guess personally I'm asking the question because I feel like I'm in a really comfortable stage in life by God's grace. Not ever taking that for granted. I have a job that I love.
Yeah.
Financially we're doing all right. I live in the middle of Brighton. Everything is going really well for me in this moment. When do we start thinking about, okay, am I playing safe? Am I just being comfortable? And maybe God's got some adventure for me to go on.
I think if your attitude is to follow Jesus, and I think in your prayer life and in your day to day, you say, God, help me to follow you. I think God opens an opportunity and prompts us, and I think that's. One of the I guess the aspects of I'm talking about this purpose, and I guess the question is, how do I know what God's put? How do I know how He's prompting me and that sort of thing? And
that would have been my next question.
Yeah, so I think it ties into this. I think part of it is that, firstly, it comes from an attitude from us to be open to that always being, God, I want to follow you, but also that the trusting that God will speak to us at the right time and that He will present an opportunity to us or start speaking to us, or we feel stirred about something particularly, and that will lead us into taking a step of to step of faith or taking a risk. Like, following Jesus is risky, and sometimes it doesn't feel risky, and sometimes there's less risk than at other times. But the walk of faith is a walk of faith, and so and again, I guess we can talk about the purposes of God in terms of like we automatically perhaps think about like doing something. Well, I'm doing this in my life right now, and it feels quite safe and that sort of thing. But actually, often the purpose of God is what he's doing in you. And actually, even if our circumstances are not changing that much, okay, but what is actually, can I get on board with what God wants to do in my life, in my heart? How is he changing my character? How is the relationship I'm in, that what people are speaking to me, and what can I learn from that God is doing in me? Because God wants to change my heart, and maybe this season is about learning that, and then God is going to bring another circumstance further down the road that is going to make more sense. Superb. I guess I'm talking a little bit in abstract, but so let me talk about more of my life. So sometimes I talk to people about my journey and a journey in terms of church ministry and that sort of thing. Is like, for me, I'm not a very futuristic person, so take this, different people have different temperaments. So I've never asked to do anything, if you see what I mean. I'm not very ambitious.
You have to do live brunch with me.
Well,
keep insisting.
You begged me, mate. No, that's not true. I forced myself on this. But all I can say for my life is trying to do what God has put in front of you, and then God just give you an opportunity, and I can just say that's what's happened in my life, and yeah.
Sorry, I was just checking to see if you had any questions. If anybody has any questions, please
yeah.
drop them in the YouTube chat or the Instagram chat. I think the other big thing to say is in this whole small group context, and by being around other people, talking stuff out with people, being inspired, reading Christian biographies and autobiographies. Hudson Taylor's got some tremendous stuff, but there's just loads of really good, inspiring stuff out there, which sometimes God speaks through those books. One thing I found really helpful at the start of lockdown, I read a book by a guy called Mark Sayers, Reappearing Church.
Oh, yeah.
And he shares this story in the introduction, and I'll read out a quote from it, by a story of a guy called Douglas Hyde, who was the editor of the Daily Worker, which was the newspaper of the British Communist Party. And he becomes a Christian. And then he shares this, coming straight as it were. This is the quote from the book. Coming straight as it were from one world, so the British Communist Party, to another church, it astounded me that there should be people with such numbers at their disposal, and with the truth on their side, going around weighed down by the thought that they were a small, beleaguered minority, carrying on some sort of impossible fight against the majority. This very concept was wrong. Psychologically, it was calamitous. And he says that Hyde had left a political movement that, even though they contained only 45,000 members, never saw it as a fragile minority. Instead, it saw it as an exciting challenge in that minority position to be leveraged. And just being reminded that the gospel that we have, the truth, the power of the Holy Spirit, Jesus, and the church, and not seeing the church as like this little community of friends that we have, but just the tremendous purpose that the church has in proclaiming the gospel to the ends of the earth. And to the ends of the earth could be the end of my street for me at the moment, and just being re-energized. So for me, my street, I live in the North Lane. My street is my mission field. My neighbors to the house on the left of us and the house across the road from us, we built a friendship around that. But they are my mission field. And they are the ones that I pray for. God, give me opportunities to share the gospel with them. Let my life be a light to them. Let me find those moments where I can invite them to the live stream, or the brilliant Light in the Dark Place Christmas concert production that we've got coming up. Just let that be a tool that they would come across and be inspired and come to know Jesus. It's just realizing that we aren't. Yes, it could feel like there's huge opposition to our message and the gospel and some of the Christian beliefs. And we've all been in conversations where people have outright mocked us and ridiculed us and argued with us and got angry with us for some of the values that we hold on to. But just reminding ourselves that we've got purpose. and we've got Jesus. And so I found that really helpful in realigning my whole vision for the church and vision for what I'm doing and my purpose in life connected within the church. And it's not just me and my solo purposes, and it's not just me and me being the next rock star or whatever. It's God's given me purpose, but the purpose is very much linked in with His church and with His kingdom, and I get to be part of. Just the church and the gospel is huge.
I don't think you can actually read the book of Acts and then like not be ambitious for God. Like that you just see a group of people that have been encountered the presence of Jesus, the reality of Him, and they're ambitious for God. And I think that is, ambition will look different for different people in different seasons. Of course it will. But that attitude of, no, these things have held us back before, but Christ has so filled our vision that gives us confidence and ambition. And whether that's ambition in terms of speaking to your neighbor or starting a small group or, going on a new crazy business venture or whatever, or just living counterculturally in your workplace, or that sort of thing.
Even being radical with your giving. Giving in a way that you're saying, God, I'm giving, I'm taking myself out of that comfort zone, but I'm trusting in you. I'm trusting that you will provide for me and meet my needs as I give. But the other thing is we would be silly not to mention this, is is church planting, and just being inspired by the stories of the men and women who've gone out from our own church to plant across Europe. And even, I think we were in a prayer meeting, maybe about a Big Wednesday a few weeks ago, where even just talking to some of the people from Emmanuel at the moment who are selling their houses and moving to Belfast to help serve Kenny and Nicola and plant a church up in Belfast, which is extraordinary. So there's people around us who are quitting their jobs or looking for jobs in Belfast, selling their homes and moving to Belfast to plant a church. And COVID has also helped, where some people are choosing, I can work from home, so I may as well work from Belfast than working from Brighton. So there's some extraordinary stories of people around who are just doing crazy things for the gospel. And there's always purpose for us. I mean, one of the questions that I found most challenging sometimes is what aspect of your life actually requires faith. And I think that's one way to possibly appraise our life. Like, how are you living that really requires God to come through for you? Like, if God doesn't answer your prayer, like you're going to be snookered. And I think that is the kind of life that God calls us to live. That's what it means to follow Jesus, not just Jesus as someone that we listen to sometimes, but actually that attitude of, I'm going to follow Jesus, whether it's financial giving, whether it's taking a risk in terms of sharing the gospel, or just living counterculturally, or We have a question on the chat.
Oh, brilliant.
Ruth Preston, our good friend Ruth. Hi, Ruth.
Hi, Ruth.
How do you choose what to spend your time doing and what to say no to? Are there any principles that govern your decision-making purpose? I guess let's narrow that down to the whole purpose theme. So, sorry, Ruth, if I'm interpreting this wrong, but I would assume that once you know your purpose, or once you have a clear sense of direction of where God's taking you, what some of the decisions you should be making to help facilitate that.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think a number of things can help. I guess with all of these things, like I think of that film Chariots of Fire, when the guy, and he's like, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. And I think that is part of it. I think when we're in the purpose of God, not to say that it's necessarily we're doing the things that are easy and there's no challenge in it, but actually we sense, no, when I do this thing, there seems to be a sense of fruitfulness to it, and I know a sense of God's pleasure in me doing it. And I think that type of thing is the thing that we should make sure we are pursuing, because God's highlighting to us. It doesn't necessarily mean we should just ignore everything else, like ignore your family or whatever, because I'm just doing this is God's purpose. No, because I think God's purpose is broad for us. I mean, I talked about how He's called me to be husband, father, etc., that sort of thing. But sensing the things that you got to feel God's pleasure in, sensing where there's fruitfulness, and prioritizing those things.
Super, Matt. Our time has come to an end.
Oh,
thank you so much for being with us, Matt.
My
And,
pleasure. Needs to do small group questions.
Yeah, I was going to do
Oh,
that.
you go, sorry.
You might have more questions, and you might, and I will genuinely say that we'd suggest joining a small group, being a part of a small group,
Definitely.
work out these questions, work out these decisions in a small group context. And here's we've got 3 questions for your small group. The first one is, what are the most frustrating ways in which your plans have been changed this year? As if you've not already discussed that multiple times, but why not discuss it one more time? How do you feel about God's plans and purposes for your life? And the last question, what do you think might be the ways that God is prompting you about your purpose in Him right now? And there might be some big changes, there might be some big decisions. Please speak to your small group leader or your site leader, or drop Matt an email. I'm sure he would love to hear from you. But thanks so much for joining us. And we're now going to play the Hark the Herald video by the fantastic Lou Felly. So enjoy that. And we will see you next week for the season premiere of A Christmas Unlike Any Other.
That's right. Well done. See you soon.